whenever the water turned into blood, couldn't drink anything. So they were dying of thirst.
So they had to pay the Jews.
So they had to pay the Jews whatever they owed them. But nobody knew what they owed them.
Right.
So if an Egyptian would tell a Jew, oh, I need a glass of water or I'm going to die. He's giving him a glass of water, it's still blood. He says, I'll give you 1,000, denarii.
Give him as much
He's
as...
like, okay, no problem. He gives him a cup of water, it's still blood. He says, 10,000.
Okay, welcome back everybody to the Pray Hard, Play Hard YouTube channel and podcast.
Right. Please subscribe. I hope you find this informative.
And entertaining.
That's right. Please subscribe, press that like button, and recommend
Liking
to other
is
people.
Absolutely free.
That it is.
All right.
Let's get this going. All right.
Okay, so let's start the Parshah with, I wrote it on a utility bill because I couldn't find my notebook in the office.
Okay,
So,
whatever works.
Yeah. So we're going to start off by saying that there's a few reasons why the Jews were merited to come out of Mitzrayim.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons is they didn't change a few. They didn't change their names. They didn't change the way they dressed.
Language.
They also didn't change their language.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of instances that you see that we always kept our own language, even though we didn't always speak Hebrew. You look in a lot of countries, in a lot of Latin countries, they spoke Ladino, which was like a Jewified version of Spanish and Yiddish,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually says that whatever language the Jewish people decided to speak, even though it wasn't Lashon HaKodesh, it was actually considered holier than other languages because it was designated for the Jewish people to speak.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's actually an interesting correspondence between his last name was Montefiore. He was speaking to one of the Ger Rebbes. Basically, he said there's a proof from Mordechai that Jews should know all types of languages, should speak all types of languages.
Okay.
He said, why? Because if Mordechai wouldn't have known the language of Bigsan and Seresh, then the king wouldn't have been saved.
That's right.
And the whole, reason why the Jews were saved was because Achashverosh remembered that Mordechai saved him. So the Sfas Emes, no, it wasn't the Sfas Emes, it was the Chidush Sheharim maybe. He turned and said, without missing a beat, he said, that's a proof why Jews shouldn't learn all the languages. You shouldn't learn to speak all types of languages, because that means that they knew that the average Jew doesn't speak other languages. That was the way of Jews for generations. We didn't worry about other languages. We worried about our own language. But Mordechai, who was on the Sanhedrin, the people at the top had to have information, they had to know many worldly things in order to do what they had to do. But that was only Mordechai, people in the Sanhedrin. But the average Jew has to worry about Torah mitzvahs. It doesn't have to be,
all over the place, yeah.
And this Montefiore, he was a rabbi, he was a great man. He says, okay, but at least we have to have some Jews like Mordechai who are well versed in all different types of languages. And so he turns around to him and he says, it's enough that you're that guy.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was there's plenty of stories that show how there was somebody actually who he was being tortured, unfortunately, to death. He was an evil regime at that time, and they were cutting his tongue, and he said the reason why he's getting his tongue cut is because he something to do with him teaching in another language and not in Hebrew, like crazy things. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean that now we can't speak English, and not only that, but there's actually, it says that there's a reason that when you speak Lashon HaKodesh, you speak Hebrew, you should only speak it for holy things. When you're speaking business or whatever, you shouldn't speak Lashon HaKodesh because it's a holy language. It shouldn't be used for mundane things that aren't holy.
Right. That makes sense.
But the point is that we kept our culture, and we kept the language that we spoke. I actually speak in Yiddish to my kid. I think it's very important, My wife speaks to him in Hebrew, but
That's pretty cool.
yeah. And English he'll get from you. But the point, I guess, that we can take from here is to stick to Hashem, to stick to the Torah, not worry about what the world does and the world's opinion. They just did this whole a few hit pieces they did on the New York Times, Mach Shemam Zichram. they did a piece about why yeshiva education, how it's doing, and it's like we have the lowest crime rate, the lowest, unemployment rate, like all these things. Don't worry about us. Our education is fine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. They always try to find something.
It's excuses.
Don't concentrate on that.
Anyway, so let's talk about. Okay, so it actually says that Moshe Rabbeinu, when they came to Paro, so Moshe spoke in Hebrew, and Aaron translated in Egyptian, in the Mitzri language.
Okay.
And that's because it's interesting to know that it says, I don't know what, I forgot
But they
what
were
it said.
talking to Pharaoh. Why didn't he just speak to him in Egyptian?
Moshe?
Yeah.
So
He spoke the language.
So it's interesting. It says that when he went to Yisro, he actually spoke to them in Egyptian,
Okay.
and in Egyptian language, and that's why his daughters told Yisro
That he's Egyptian.
that the Egyptian man came because he's speaking in Egyptian. But by the time he came back, it was so long since he had been in Egypt that he forgot. So he only knew Hebrew, so he had to speak in Hebrew, and that's why Aaron had to translate. The Pasha Pshat is that
Wait, he lived in Midian all this time.
yeah.
So he spoke Hebrew in Midian?
He spoke whatever he spoke to Yitro. I don't know what he spoke to him. Maybe he learned the Midianite language. Who knows?
He must have spoken
Yeah.
Egyptian because Yitro was an Egyptian, remember? Yitro was an Egyptian magician.
Was he originally Egyptian?
Yeah. He saved his life. He saved Moshe
Moshe's
Rabbeinu's life.
Well, first he put him in a pit, and then he saves his life. Because Yisro actually had to run away because he told Paro, I think, not to kill the Jewish babies or something like
Right.
that. And Paro was angry, so he had to run away.
Right.
So he went to Midian. And then Bilam said to kill them.
Right.
And there's also a whole
There was
crazy
a third
story.
one that stayed
Eov.
quiet.
Eov. And that's why one of the reasons why it says that he had all his tribulations, he was tested by God. There's a whole book dedicated, the book of Eov, dedicated to him. But yes, that's what it's saying. It's
So
very
Yisro saved Moshe Rabbeinu's life more than once.
yeah. But when
Technically.
but when he ran away from Paro, first he put him in a pit.
Right, because he didn't want problems with
Paro.
Yeah.
And then Tzipora brought him food, and he saw that after years and years he was still alive. It's a crazy story.
I think it was 10 years?
It was a
7
very
years, something like
it was
that.
it was a bunch of years. I actually didn't. Probably at the end of last week's Parshah talks about it, but I didn't get that far. Okay, so it actually says why one of the reasons why Yosef was able to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, why Moshe wasn't, because Moshe spoke Egyptian when he was in Mitzrayim.
No, because he introduced himself as a Jew. Because no matter where Yosef was,
He introduced
he
himself.
always introduced himself
So I'm
as
saying,
a Jew.
so he always went with his Jewish identity, but Moshe obviously was a tzaddik, but because tzaddikim are judged very, very strictly, so because he spoke Egyptian and didn't speak Hebrew at a certain point, I guess when he was, therefore he was judged for that.
It was one of the reasons.
Yeah, well,
Not
obviously
the-
it's not really the main reason. The main reason we know
Yeah.
why. Now, I just want to make sure that
Another reason was because he hit a rock instead of speaking to him.
Right, he hit the rock, he spoke badly about the Jews.
There was a couple of other reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. That was the main reason, really, why he hit the rock, I think. That was like the main reason. Now, we're about to get, so this Parsha, right, basically, Hashem tells Moshe to go and tell Paro to let the Jews go. And something interesting, it says that it took 7 days for Hashem to convince Moshe to go. 7 days.
Yeah, because he went back and forth.
Yeah,
I'm
he
not
went back
fit
and
for
forth.
this. I don't know. Maybe you
Yeah.
should choose another one.
Exactly.
Look
But-
at my lisp.
Right, he said, yeah, all these different things. Which, by the way, it says that at Matan Torah, he was healed. At Matan Torah, Moshe was healed.
Yeah.
That's why he was able to give over, the Torah properly. I think most people agree that since everyone was healed, Moshe was also healed. There's one opinion, I think it says that he wasn't healed, and there was a reason for that, but I'm not going to go into that right now. Now let's see. So we're talking about the makot, right? We talk about the plagues that Hashem sent. So before we do that, we're going to talk about Moshe's staff. So you know that Moshe's staff was a very special staff. I think he found it by Yisro. He was the only one who was able to take it out of the ground. It was all the way from the time of Adam Harishon, I think. It was made out of sapphire. Again,
The staff was made out of sapphire?
Yeah.
Okay.
That
That means he was already a filthy rich man.
It was made out of a special stone. I believe it was sapphire. It was not a regular wooden staff. Actually, there's opinions that say that Aaron used his own staff, which was made out of wood, and that Moshe's was made out of sapphire. And some people say that Aaron, whenever he used his staff, it was Moshe's staff.
Okay.
But and it actually, so here's something very interesting. It says that the actual plagues were carved out or written out onto the staff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, some people say that only the initials, only the acronyms were. So, you know, on Pesach when we say Ditzach Adash Be'achav, so it says that's what was written. Some people say it was actually spelled out.
Oh,
and
wow.
then some people say that it was actually spelled out, but mixed up. So it didn't write Dam. There was a Mem somewhere and a Dalet somewhere, and there was a... And
he just had to put it together.
And he had to put it together. And it's very interesting you say that because basically Hashem told Moshe that he was going to tell the plagues, and there's an opinion that says that Moshe had to decipher what they were.
Uh-huh.
And that's why he was able to say, for example, even at the end, he knew, right? I think he warned him that at the end there was going to be, choshech makat bechorot. Even before it happened, he was able to say it earlier, was because he was able to decipher that. And the only one, there's an opinion that says that he was able to, he chose the plague of, locusts, arbe. And according to this, that it was on the staff, he couldn't have chose it. Because it's already written out. But according to the opinion that says that it was all mixed up, basically he figured out all of them except for the last one. He's like, what is it? Oh, and the only thing that was left was the aleph resh beis. He's like, oh, it's arba. And so it's locusts. But whatever, it's very fascinating. The whole...
Well, yeah, even if he was able to spell them out, we as human beings, okay, it says locust. What does that mean? You can't think that there's a plague until it happens.
Well,
You
again,
understand what I mean?
so Moshe Rabbeinu had to basically choose at that point, had to decipher it. It means, I think, that it was by a process of elimination he was able to tell. Okay, this is what I didn't know what this plague was going to be, but it's going to be Arbe. It's going to be Aleph Resh Beis. Very interesting. I tell you, it goes so deep, so
Wow.
deep. Yeah. Now we're going to talk about the first Makkah. The first Makkah.
All of that sounds like practical Kabbalah, no?
I mean,
No? It sounds like practical Kabbalah.
like having to decipher the letters.
Having to do all the things that were done if when it's described in such detail.
For someone to be able to do that, I mean, first of all, they have to be a genius.
Yeah.
To go.
Well, Hashem is the one who made it happen.
No, I mean, for someone to decipher what the
Yeah, of course.
But and also, Hashem told Moshe which plagues he was going to. It's not like he didn't know, but Moshe was able to already. It seems from what it was saying in the Sefer that Moshe chose Arbe. All the other ones, like he either were predetermined already knew, and he chose locust. So the way that makes sense, even
So he could have spelled it something else, and something else would have happened.
who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Again, that's an interesting question. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the blood. So there are some opinions that say that the water only turned to blood for an hour, and then it turned back. But at that point, all the fish had already died,
Okay.
and it stunk and it rotted, and so they couldn't drink from the water. So they still had no water.
What about the whole concept of Egyptians buying water from Jews?
Huh? Right. So again, there's a lot of different midrashim, and it seems that they did not have any source of water. I mean, there are opinions that say that when they opened up an orange, blood would come out.
So they couldn't even drink juice.
Yeah, I'm saying it's this parsha, I think, has an insane amount of direction and explanations of what exactly went on. Actually, and according to this, it's very easy to explain how the magicians were able to turn the water into blood. Because if everything was blood, how did they find water to turn into blood? So what happened was, it only turned to blood for an hour.
And then turn back.
And then they took the water and turned it into blood. But actually, it's very interesting because it says that there's another explanation that says that the water didn't all turn to blood at once. It slowly turned into blood. It spread. So the magicians went quickly somewhere where it didn't turn to blood. They took it and they said, "Oh, it turned to blood. Look, we turned it to blood." But really, it was Hashem who turned it.
It was already turning.
Yeah. But they just got the water before that body of water turned to blood, which is very, very, a very interesting explanation. Now, we know that all of the plagues that came weren't just for nothing. Mm-hmm. They were because the Egyptians hurt the Jews in certain ways, and that's why God brought this on them.
They paid them in certain ways.
Right, certain ways. In these specific ways. So, number one, it says, this is a very fundamental, general idea that there's nothing bad, even seemingly bad, that really comes from God. And if something bad happens to a person, even though we know nothing bad is from Hashem, but down here, it's only because of a person's negative actions that bad can be created. Mm-hmm. So that's why these plagues happen. The way, if you just let nature run, it's all going to be good. But once a person creates, God forbid, a negative through his actions, that's the only way that punishment can happen. So he was saying, so the reason for the blood, one of the reasons it says is because they didn't allow the Jewish women, what do they want to do? They wanted to stop recreation. They wanted to stop them having children. They wanted to stop procreation. So one of the ways they did that was they didn't allow the Jewish women to go to the mikveh.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they didn't allow them to purify from the once a woman has a period, they have a menstruation, which is blood, right? So they have to go to the mikveh to be with their husband again. So because they didn't allow them to do that, they took the water that they didn't allow the women to immerse themselves in, to go to the mikveh in, and they turned that into blood. It's exact midah keneged midah. There's also if you look at the strategy of war, the makos, the plagues were in exactly that order. First, you cut off their water source. Then you come with trumpets, right? The frogs made an incredible amount of noise. And you go through the entire thing, and it actually shows how strategically, when you go on to war with somebody else, that also is the way
it's almost like nature had a war with them.
Yeah.
Hashem did it through nature.
Yeah. Oh, now here it says something very interesting. The Ritva says that the blood wasn't only blood, it actually turned hot. Super hot, that it actually had smoke coming out of it. So imagine like hot lava.
It was boiling. Yeah.
It was like lava.
Oh, man.
Imagine
It stunk.
Oh, it was horrible.
God.
It was horrible.
Like death. You imagine something. You ever smelled something that's rotting
and it's burning.
Yeah. And it's hot. Like my God.
Yeah. It says that a lot of the plagues came along with very horrible smells. The blood, the frogs, the pestilence, and also the boils, the open skin. It was
also, there was an opinion that said that the Jews, whenever the water turned into blood, the Egyptians couldn't drink anything, so they were dying of thirst.
So they had to pay the Jews.
So they had to pay the Jews whatever they owed them, but nobody knew what they owed them. Because once they enslaved them, they stopped paying them.
Yeah.
So because they stopped paying them, it all adds up. Right. So if an Egyptian would tell a Jew, "Oh, I need a glass of water, or I'm gonna die," he's giving him a glass of water. It's still blood. He says, "I'll give you 1,000, denarii."
Give him as much.
He's like, "Okay, no problem." He gives him a cup of water. It's still blood. He says 10,000, still blood. Until he gives him the amount that he owes him. But nobody knows what he owes him.
Wow, I never heard this. Yeah.
So he had to keep adding until it turns white.
Until he went bankrupt.
Right, until he, right. But the reality is, it's either he goes bankrupt or he dies.
Yeah, right.
So which one of us would choose to die?
Something like that. A person will give whatever he can just so he can live.
So at that point, the Jews already got rich. Think about it.
Yeah.
If they paid them what they owed them for so many years, you're already getting rich.
If you think about it, the whole thing is so crazy because the Jews were having already, from the beginning of the first plague, the Jews were having an easier time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Things were already shifting.
Yeah. Oh, but certain plagues, the Jews were riding the animals instead of being bitten by them. It's very interesting midrashim you see. So we know that Moshe didn't hit the water. Aaron did, and that's because he didn't hit the water or the dust. Any makkah that had to do with dust or water, he didn't hit them. Why? Because the water saved him when he was a baby. Mm-hmm. And the dust saved him because he said Shem Hashem, and the dust covered, he said the name of Hashem, and the dust covered the Egyptian that he killed.
Soil, yeah.
So we see actually that there's a story of the Rimi Gash. He says about the Rif. The Rimi Gash was the Rebbe, was the teacher of the Rambam.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was actually a teacher. I think he was a teacher of the Rambam's father. I don't remember the exact story, but the Rambam as a little boy, I think went to the Rimi Gash already. So the Rimi Gash, his Rebbe was the Rif. So the Shita Mikubetza says that he was once very sick, and a certain person brought him to. This person owned the bathhouse. He took him to the bathhouse, and washed him and made him feel better. And then he brought him into his house, and he took care of him until he felt better. Mm-hmm. And and later on, this guy became poor, and he had to sell, and he had to pay back a lot of debts. Mm-hmm. And somebody. And people went to the Rif, the same person who benefited from this bathhouse, and said, "Oh, we need to appraise. We need to appraise the value of this bathhouse because we have to pay back people. Mm-hmm. He has to pay people back. And the Rif said no." I'm not going to do this because I benefited from that bathhouse. So I'm not going to have anything to do with it. You have to go to somebody else. And the Shita Mekubetzes finishes and says, look at something which is a doimim. It's an inanimate object. It doesn't have any feelings. And yet, because he had benefit from it, he didn't want to, cause its downfall, so to speak. It's transferring ownership, whatever. How much more so to the person himself and in general with us, to people, how we have to be so careful that if he ever did anything good for us, we can't bite the hand that feeds us, so to speak. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it says that one of the reasons why Hashem brought the first makkah of blood was because, and also told Moshe Rabbeinu to go and see Paro by the river, was in order to discredit both of the Egyptian gods. Mm-hmm. Number one, it was the Nilus, the water, because it rose on its own. They worshipped the Nilus. And also, once he goes to Paro, and Paro went to the Nilus, he went to the Nile River in order to go to the bathroom. Why? Mm-hmm. Because he said he's a god. So, and he couldn't go to the bathroom anywhere else, so he would go to the river, and it says actually that, we said this the other time, that going near the water is very good for health. Just looking at the water is good for your health. And so kings would all go by the water. So he went to the water, and he actually go into the water, and then he would go to the bathroom in the water. So it was in order to embarrass both of them, to expose both the gods. And it ends up saying, I forgot who's the one who says this, but look at how low Paro was, that he was ready to disgrace the god of Mitzrayim just in order to maintain his image as a god. Uh-huh. Oh, I forgot a bunch of things here. Okay, so it says that the Kli Yakar says that actually the Tanin, most of them call a snake, there are different opinions what that was. Some people say it was a huge, giant sea creature, and the reason why it was like a fish, but a big one, and the reason why Hashem turned the staff into a sea creature was to show Paro, you tried to turn the Jews into a dry stick, right? Tried to stop them from procreating, make them bring death to them. Mm-hmm. And And in the end, what happens? This dry stick turned into a fish. The same way you'll never be able to turn the Jews into a dry stick. You're just going to become fruitful and multiply like fish. You mentioned this the other time. So it was actually a hidden message there, that no matter how much you try to dry up the Jewish people, they're actually going to keep on multiplying like fish. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop here. There's so much more. Hopefully there'll be a part 2. So stay tuned.
There definitely will be.
Okay. See you guys.